Today, we're going to be talking about the November Markham real estate updates, the provincial and federal government's policies that affect you as the homeowner and home buyer, and the Bank of Canada interest rate announcement. Let's get started. So the first thing we should talk about is the provincial government policy, right? The 2 additional dwellings per household. So you got the main floor, then you got the basement, and then you got the backyard. So they're allowing homeowners to rent the backyard and the basement. So my question really is that going to improve supply? Like it should, right? Now my question though is that going to affect the homeowners really that much? Because the ones that are renting out their basements, they are already doing it. They're just doing it illegally, right? They don't report to the government at all. Okay, now the backyard is interesting. We'll see if people will want to live in the backyard. I think they will, as long as it's affordable and they can, they have the amenities that's necessary, right? The second component that the provincial government implemented recently is the foreign buyer tax of 25%. So that's, if you don't have a Canadian citizenship, you're not, you don't have your PR status, then you're in a big pickle. Okay. Is there ways to get around that? Sure, but it's going to be very challenging, okay, and cumbersome compared to other provinces. Okay. Now let's address, the elephant in the room, which is the government's, push to build on conservation areas. Right. So let's assume that they actually do go ahead with it, despite the protests that's happening all over the province. Okay. Is it a bad idea really to have deals with builders, right? Because what do? They build homes, right? If they were to open up the auction to companies, right? What they may do is if they were to buy homes, they're probably not building homes for the masses. They're probably going to hold and hope for builders to buy them out, who will then in turn build them and then sell them at a premium because of that. Right. And so is it really a bad thing? You need to ask yourself that as a buyer, as a home buyer. As a homeowner living right beside the conservation area, that's a different story, right? The properties and the lot sizes beside the conservation areas, they paid premiums for that property, okay, compared to the other neighbors and the homes that aren't so close to the conservation area. We're talking about 100,000 additional, 150, 300, even $400,000 additional that homeowners were happy to pay because they thought that there was nothing to be built in the back or in the side. Okay. So you need to really consider that as a homeowner. If you're in that situation, you might be thinking, okay, is it time to sell right now? Right now, we don't know if this is going to go through or not. Right. There's still lots of hurdles that the provincial government needs to go through. And so it's always, different perspectives. And I hope that, you learn from this. Okay. So the second policy we should look at with the federal government is the foreign buyer ban starting in January. Okay. So is there going to be a workaround? Right. Yeah, there is. Right. But I'm not going to get into that. And even if they do get around that, they still will likely need to pay the 25% foreign buyer tax in Ontario. So that leads to a question is, if you're a foreigner that's an investor, do you really want to buy property in Ontario, or would you rather go to different places, right? Would you want to go to Alberta, right, where it's more affordable? We don't know. Next thing we should talk about is the Toronto vacant tax rule. Okay, I know this is Markham we were talking about, but and why am I telling you about the Toronto tax rule? Right? Does it implement you? Does it affect you? Well, honestly, it can, right? Because what they're doing is if you as a homeowner are not living that property for 6 months, then you need to pay a 1% tax, okay, based on your home value. Now, from what I gather, it's 1% of the tax of the home value assessed by the government. Okay, it's not the 1% tax of the market value of your home, because the market value is always going to be higher. Okay, so will other municipalities such as Markham implement this? Right, if they see Toronto's having a huge success, they may want to do this because they are losing revenue from the provincial government's intervention of 2 additional dwellings. They're stepping on their toes. Right now, the question then really becomes how will Toronto enforce this rule? Right, because there's two two different things. There's rules and there's enforcement. All right. Usually the enforcement is the one that is very costly to the city, to the municipality, right? Because you need to hire staff to enforce it. So those are the things you need to look out for. And what we should talk about too is China, right? So in the past, China would shut down neighborhoods due to COVID and even businesses as well. Okay. So China is beginning to ease their COVID restrictions, which will stabilize their economy and global supply chain, right? Hopefully, this leads to lower prices. Okay, so raw materials, building equipment, building supplies, anything, any basic good that we import, right, is usually manufactured from China. And so, if their economy is becoming more stabilized, hopefully prices go lower for us, and inflation will continue to go down. But leading up to that, then, right, for the Bank of Canada, they just announced a 50 basis points increase, right, just a couple of days ago, and they did say this is what they said on their website. Okay, they said in Canada, GDP growth in the third quarter was stronger than expected, and the economy continued to operate in excess demand. Canada's labor market remains tight, with unemployment near historic lows. Okay, so they said stronger than expected. Okay, so that's a red flag for me. Okay, they're very likely to raise interest rates again in January. Okay, moving on. However, inflation is still too high and short-term inflation expectations remain elevated. The longer that consumers and businesses expect inflation to be above the target, the greater the chances that elevated inflation becomes entrenched. So it's very confusing to me because they're saying inflation's high and they're saying it's because our fault that we're expecting the prices to be above the target that inflation is going to be high. So they're essentially blaming us for something that they're doing, which is to keep saying inflation is too high, inflation is too high. So that's what I find odd. But anyways, let's get started and talk about the Markham real estate market stats broken down by home type. Now, keep in mind that this is not a direct reflection about your home price, okay? Other factors need to be accounted for, such as the age of the home, the location, and the finishes and upgrades, and a lot more, to be honest. So if you want more of a specific home evaluation, call me and contact me. Send me an email. Okay, so let's get started. So for Markham, November stats, okay, 208 transactions, 398 active listings with the average price of 1.344 million. It's still a seller's market and it took 18 days to sell a home. Now, it's good to note that the average Markham home went up by 5%, okay, on a month-to-month basis. And if you compare it to all-time high of February, it was about 1.559, which is about 14% drop. Okay, now that number might be scary, but if you compare this number to other asset classes, such as the stock market, the crypto market, right, you'll see that we're actually outperforming them significantly. Okay, on a year-to-year basis, so November 2021 versus November 2022, the stock market actually dropped by 26%, and the crypto market dropped by 78%. So even if we're comparing all-time highs of February, right, which only dropped by 14%, you're still outperforming them. But on a year-to-year basis, Markham only dropped by 3%. Okay. So it's always important to put things into perspective, okay, when you're thinking about real estate prices. Okay. Now, on another important thing to note, okay, is that if you bought a home before November 2019, right, prices generally went up by 28% still. Okay. So that's great for homeowners. But for buyers, it's very unfortunate because not only is it costing them more, 28% more, but interest rates are a lot higher now than they were in 2019. Okay. So let's get on to the detached homes in Markham. So the sales were 99 sales. Okay. 184 active listings, 1.76 million for average price, a 2% increase a month before. And it is still a seller's market. Okay. And in terms of the days on market, it only took 2 additional days to sell a detached home in Markham. If you look at all-time highs rates, right, there's 37% less transactions that happened this month than February 2022. And it's about a 17% decrease, okay, in Markham detached homes. And it took half the time to sell a home in February, 9 days. Now, again, you need to put things into perspective, right? Is it still a seller's market? Well, yes, it is, because again, the type of market is less than 5, right? If it's from 5 to 6, it's a balanced market. And from 6 onwards, it is actually a buyer's market. So please get that in your mind that it is still seller's market. Now, if you compare though, it's interesting to note that there's actually less active listings now than the peak of February 2022. There's less listings. So back then there was very few listings, but now it's even less. So is it really a market crash right now? Based on these numbers, right, for detached homes in Markham, not really. It went up, right? The prices went up. There's more sales. There's less listings. So despite what media is saying and what your friends and family are telling you because they heard on the radio or they heard from somewhere that price, markets are crashing, it's not. So moving on to semi-detaches, right? There's only 12 transactions that happened, 12 listings available, and the price actually remained virtually the same. Okay, it actually went up by about $4,000. And it's still a seller's market, and it took half the amount of days to sell a home in Markham for semi-detaches. So obviously comparing to all-time highs of February, right? 35 transactions, 40 active listings. The prices were up by 22% more. And it was actually still a seller's market, but more so it is now than it was before. Okay, just based on the numbers. And it only took 4 days to sell a home in February. Okay. Now, again, if you purchased your home before November 2019, you're up by at least 39%, which is great for homeowners, not great so much for home buyers though. Okay. And it actually took longer to sell back then than it is now. 16 days. Okay. So for townhouses in Markham, right, there are 23 transactions, 60% less than the month before. Okay. In Markham. And there's more listings now than it was a month before, about 52% more. Okay. Now, if you look at the average price though, it actually dipped a little bit, just by about 1%. Okay. 1.18 million. And the type of market, it jumped quite a bit from 0.44 in October to 1.65. Okay, as this type of market, but it's still a seller's market, guys. And on days on market, it's only 11 days versus 12. On a year-to-year basis, the days on market stayed relatively the same. Okay, 13 days is actually less. It's faster to sell homes now than it did in November 2021. Okay, what I'm expecting is that there are more people that are under pressure to sell their homes now because of the higher interest rates and they're over leveraged. Okay. There are actually more foreclosure homes that we're seeing on the market. We have a couple coming on the market soon as well. If you want to know information about it, contact me. Okay, so moving on to the next one. So the condo townhouses, right? So virtually very similar on a month-to-month basis, 19 sales versus 20. Number of listings stayed the same, 41. Now the prices did go up, okay, by 970,000 versus 828,000. So that's 17% increase on a month-to-month basis. So what I'm expecting to happen is actually a couple of sales were well above. They were renovated, nicely done, top finishes, top appliances that really drove the prices up. But we'll see what will happen when next month. Okay. In terms of days on market, still stayed a seller's market, and the days on markets, type of market still a seller's market. Days on market stayed relatively the same, right? So, yep, in terms of sales, right, 39% less transactions that are happening now than it did in February, but there are still more transactions that happen now versus pre-pandemic of 17. Okay. Also, the prices have gone up by 39%. All right. And it's still a seller's market back then and stayed the same in terms of the days on market stayed the same, 22 days to sell a home back in 2019 and now. In terms of condo apartments in Markham, right? 46 transactions, 117 active listings, and the average price dipped by about 1% on a month-to-month basis. Okay. It's still a seller's market, right? It's 2.54. And the days on market stayed relatively the same compared to the last month, 25 versus 24. Now, if you compare it to all-time highs, right? 51% more transactions happened back then, 94. Okay. Less listings, 69 listings. The prices were higher, 840,000. And it was definitely more of a seller's market back then than it is now for condo apartments. Again, though, if you purchased a condo apartment before the pandemic, November 2019, you're still up about 19%. Okay. So if you find this information useful, please like it, share it, subscribe, and talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.